The most dominant defensive player on the entire planet just got traded. And the team that almost got him, they just found Defensive Player of the Year, the most feared pass rusher alive, is gone from Cleveland. Done. Finished in a Browns user sat up in their chair. Every head coach suddenly had a new name at the top of their whiteboard. But here's the thing nobody is really talking about. While everyone is losing their minds over where Myles Garrett landed, while every analyst on every sports show is talking about the Rams and the Browns and this blockbuster deal, the Kansas City Chiefs quietly had a door open up right in front of them. And the name behind that door? It's someone who has been underrated, overlooked, and honestly, they haven't forgotten him. We are going to take you through this entire story. From the very beginning. From the moment Myles Garrett first asked out of Cleveland, all the way to the deal that shook the NFL this week. And then, most importantly, we're going to show you exactly how that deal created a brand new opening for the Chiefs. A target that makes so much sense it's almost scary. A player who could be the missing piece to put Kansas City right back on top of the NFL. So settle in, because this story, it has everything. Drama, betrayal, blockbuster trades, desperate teams, generational talent, and at the center of it all, the greatest franchise in modern NFL history, still hunting, still hungry. You have to understand something about Myles Garrett before we get into any of this. This isn't just a football player. This is an event. Every single time number 95 lines up across from an offensive tackle, something happens. Something electric. Something violent and beautiful and terrifying all at once. He doesn't just rush the passer. He hunts the passer. There's a difference. Most edge rushers are trying to get to the quarterback. Myles Garrett is trying to end the quarterback's career before he retires. He was the first overall pick in the 2017 NFL Draft. Cleveland took him with the very first selection in the entire class, and for years and years, that was the most logical thing the Browns had done in what felt like a generation. They've had bad quarterbacks, terrible coaches, disastrous front office decisions, failed experiments, everything you can imagine, but they had Myles Garrett. And as long as they had him, they had credibility. They had a reason for opposing offenses to sweat when they pulled up the schedule and saw Cleveland on the horizon. But something shifted. A little over a year ago, Myles Garrett did something that rattled the entire organization. He asked out. He requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns. A franchise that had invested everything in him, a team that had built their entire defensive identity around his presence, a city that worshipped him, and he looked at all of it and said, I want to go somewhere else. Now, the reasons were complicated. Garrett wasn't being petulant. He wasn't being difficult for the sake of being difficult. This man has watched the Browns be the Browns for his entire career. He has given everything he has, every rep in practice, every snap in a game, every drop of sweat in the offseason, and the results have been the same. A 5-12 season. 0 division titles. A revolving door of general managers and head coaches and quarterbacks that makes your head spin. He won 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards. He broke records. He was transcendent. And the team around him couldn't get out of their own way. Can you blame him? But here's where it got really complicated. The Browns said no. Not only did they say no to the trade request, they turned around and gave Myles Garrett a 4-year, $160 million extension. $160 million. They locked him in. They told him, in the clearest possible terms, you are a Cleveland Brown, and we are going to make you the richest defensive player in history to prove it. Garrett took the money. He stayed. And everybody, the media, the fans, the other teams, watched and waited to see what would happen next. The Browns went 5-12 in 2025. And Garrett won Defensive Player of the Year anyway. Because that's just who he is. Chapter 2. The Silence Before the Storm. The 2026 offseason started the same way every Cleveland Browns offseason starts. With hope that never quite materializes into anything real. The Browns kept insisting everything was fine. General Manager Andrew Berry stood at podiums and said all the right things. Myles Garrett is a career Brown. We are not trading him. We built this extension around him. He is our franchise cornerstone. We are moving forward together. The public believed it. Or at least, they wanted to believe it. But behind closed doors, something was festering. Garrett didn't show up to the off-season program. Now, that's not unusual for veteran players. Plenty of established stars skip voluntary workouts. Nobody blinked at that. But then you started hearing other things. Garrett hadn't had any face-to-face interaction with new head coach Todd Monken. He'd been in regular contact with the front office about roster moves and draft picks. They kept him in the loop, but there was something cold about it. Something transactional. Like two people who used to be close but now communicate through lawyers. He spent the off-season in Korea and Japan. Not in Berea, Ohio. Not in the facility where his team was getting ready for a new season. Halfway around the world. And the league noticed. Teams started making calls. Quietly, carefully, the way executives do when they're sniffing around something they're not sure is actually available. Nobody wanted to waste political capital on a call that would get a hard no. But they were curious. Because when the best defensive player on earth might, maybe, possibly, under the right circumstances, be available, you have to at least pick up the phone. The Browns kept saying no. But the phone kept ringing. Chapter 3. The Rams make their move. Now, before we get to the trade that changed everything, we need to talk about what the Los Angeles Rams have been building. Because this is important. This is the context that makes this whole story make sense. The Rams are not rebuilding. They are not a team in transition. They are a team that looked at the 2026 NFL season and said, "We are going for it. All the way. No hesitations, no safety nets, no thinking about next year. We are chasing a Super Bowl right now." And they started doing that by doing something that stunned everybody. They called the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs, coming off their worst season in over a decade, a 6-11 disaster that felt like the empire finally cracking, were in a strange spot. They had Patrick Mahomes, which means they always have a chance. But the supporting cast had eroded. The defense, once the terror of the AFC, had lost its edge. And two of their best defensive backs, cornerback Trent McDuffie and fellow corner Jalen Watson, were both going to be expensive to retain long-term. So when the Rams called and asked about McDuffie, the all-pro cornerback, the shutdown corner who had been one of the best at his position for 3 straight years, the Chiefs listened. And they made a deal. Trent McDuffie, one of the best cornerbacks in the entire NFL, went to Los Angeles in exchange for a haul of draft picks. The 29th overall pick in 2026, a 5th-rounder, a 6th-rounder, and a 3rd-rounder in 2027. The Chiefs also lost Jalen Watson, who signed with the Rams as a free agent. In one off-season, Kansas City went from having arguably the best cornerback tandem in football to starting over at the position entirely. It was shocking. It was bold. It was the kind of move that made people question whether Brett Veach had lost his mind or whether he was playing chess while everybody else was playing checkers. But that's a story for a different chapter. Because the Rams weren't done. With McDuffie now in Los Angeles, with their secondary suddenly looking like one of the best in football, the Rams turned their attention to the other side of the ball. They already had a good pass rush. Jared Verse was one of the most exciting young edge rushers in the league. Talented, athletic, ascending. Byron Young had just come off a Pro Bowl season with 12 sacks. Kobe Turner was one of the better interior defenders in the NFL. Good wasn't enough. Les Snead, the Rams' general manager, went back to his old playbook. You know this playbook. He used it in 2018 when he traded for Marcus Peters and Aqib Talib and Ndamukong Suh all in the same offseason. He used it when he traded for Matthew Stafford. He used it when he traded for Von Miller and Odell Beckham Jr. to win Super Bowl 56. He is not afraid to spend tomorrow's assets to win today's championship. And there was one asset on the market that he wanted more than anything else. Chapter 4. The Earthquake. June 2nd, 2026. The NFL world was minding its own business. Guys were in OTAs. Analysts were talking about the draft picks. It was a quiet Tuesday, the kind of day where nothing big usually happens. And then the reports started dropping. The Cleveland Browns and the Los Angeles Rams were finalizing a trade. The trade was for Myles Garrett. You could almost feel the collective jaw of the NFL hitting the floor at the exact same moment. Andrew Berry, the same man who had spent months telling everyone within earshot that this trade would never happen, that Garrett was untouchable, that the conversation wasn't even worth having, that same man had just agreed to send his franchise's best player across the country to a team in another conference. The price the Rams paid? Enormous. Historic. Jared Verse, one of the most promising young pass rushers in football. A 2027 first-round pick. A 2028 second-round pick. A 2029 third-round pick. That's future draft capital in 3 consecutive years, plus one of the better young defensive players in the league, all for one man. One 30-year-old man. But here's the thing that makes this trade make so much sense for both sides, even if it looks insane on the surface. For the Rams, Myles Garrett is not just a good player. He is a transcendent, once-in-a-generation force of nature who just set the single-season sack record and won Defensive Player of the Year. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. And the Super Bowl is coming back to Los Angeles, to SoFi Stadium, on Valentine's Day 2027. The Rams are going all in on a home Super Bowl, and they just added the best defensive player alive to do it. They will now be the first team in NFL history since the 1970 merger to have both the reigning most valuable player and the reigning Defensive Player of the Year on their roster at the same time. Matthew Stafford and Myles Garrett. On the same team. In the same city. Gunning for a Super Bowl in their own stadium. The Rams, who had already been 8-1 Super Bowl favorites before this trade, immediately saw their odds move to 13-2. DraftKings made them the favorite in the NFC. For the Browns? Well, they're getting younger and cheaper. Verse is on a rookie deal. They now have 2 first-round picks in the 2027 draft, which is expected to be loaded with talent. They're rebuilding, whether they want to admit it or not, and they got full value, maybe more than full value, for a player who wanted out. But none of that, not the Rams, not the Browns, none of it, is really what this video is about. Because when Myles Garrett left Cleveland, something happened in Kansas City. A door opened. Chapter 5. What the Garrett trade revealed about the Chiefs. Let's be very clear about something. The Kansas City Chiefs wanted Myles Garrett. Not in some casual, if he's available way. In a serious, we've done the math, we've had internal discussions way. Back when Garrett first requested a trade at the beginning of 2025, multiple outlets reported that the Chiefs were among the teams most interested in acquiring him. Bleacher Report ran a trade package proposal that had the Chiefs sending a first-round pick, a second-round pick, a fourth-round pick, and defensive end Mike Dana to Cleveland for Garrett. Think about what that would have meant. Patrick Mahomes and Myles Garrett. The best quarterback in the history of the sport and the best defensive player in the world, on the same team. The league would have had a genuine meltdown. Other teams would have filed formal complaints. Coaches would have lost sleep for months. It didn't happen. The Browns said no that time. They gave him the extension instead. And the Chiefs moved on. But the need didn't go away. Here's the cold hard reality of where the Chiefs are right now. They finished 6-11 last season. Their worst record in over a decade. Patrick Mahomes, the greatest quarterback alive, went through an entire regular season without reaching double-digit wins. Something is broken. And if you look at the roster construction, one of the biggest problems is obvious. Pass rush. The Chiefs recorded just 35 sacks last season. Tied for 7th fewest in the entire NFL. Let me say that again. The Kansas City Chiefs, with Patrick Mahomes under center, a team that has won multiple Super Bowls and 3 straight AFC championships in recent years, ranked in the bottom quarter of the league in pass rush production. George Karlaftis is good. Chris Jones is still Chris Jones, one of the best interior rushers in football. But beyond those two, the production falls off a cliff. Felix Anudike-Uzomah has shown flashes but hasn't become the consistent force Kansas City needs. Ashton Gillotte is promising. Rookie R. Mason Thomas is a dart throw. They needed help desperately. They knew Garrett was available. They knew what it would take to get him. And then, right before they could make their move, the Rams swooped in with an offer the Browns couldn't refuse. Gone. So now Brett Veach is sitting in his office, staring at his whiteboard, and he has to answer a question that every NFL general manager has to answer eventually. What's the next best option? And that's where this story gets really, really interesting. Chapter 6. The name you need to know. Kayvon Thibodeaux. Say that name out loud. Remember it. Because this is the player that the Myles Garrett trade just put directly in Kansas City's crosshairs. Now, if you've been paying attention to the NFL over the last few years, you know the name. But you might have some mixed feelings about it. That's okay. We're going to work through those feelings together, because the full picture is more complicated and more exciting than the headlines suggest. Here's the background. Kayvon Thibodeaux was supposed to be a generational pass rusher. The 5th overall pick in the 2022 NFL Draft by the New York Giants. Out of Oregon, where he was the best defensive player in college football for 2 consecutive seasons. First-team All-Pac, 12 back-to-back. A guy who was drawing comparisons to guys like Myles Garrett himself during his college career. The Giants took him 5th overall. The football world circled the pick. This was the guy. The cornerstone of New York's defensive rebuild. The pass rusher they'd been missing since the great days of their defense. And in his first 3 seasons, he delivered. 21 sacks. 127 total tackles. 26 tackles for loss. 11 pass deflections. 6 forced fumbles. Those numbers are legitimately good. They're not world-beating, franchise-altering production, but they are solid, above-average, starting-caliber pass rush numbers from a young player who was still learning the NFL game. But then 2025 happened. A shoulder injury cut his season short at just 10 games. He finished with only 2.5 sacks. And suddenly, all the questions that people had been quietly whispering about started getting louder. Was the ceiling lower than everyone thought? Was the injury a sign of fragility? Would he ever become the dominant force everyone expected? And then, while he was still recovering, while his future in New York was still uncertain, the Giants did something that really changed the math. They drafted Abdul Carter with the 3rd overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. Abdul Carter. An electric, multi-dimensional linebacker who can rush the passer from multiple alignments, cover ground like a safety, and make plays all over the field. Paired with veteran Brian Burns, who had 12 sacks in 2025, the Giants now had a legitimate 1-2 punch on the edge that they hadn't had in years. 3 elite pass rushers on one team? That's expensive. That's redundant. That's a roster management puzzle that the Giants front office has been quietly trying to solve all off-season. Reports started surfacing. Thibodeaux's name was coming up in trade discussions. Teams were calling. The Giants were listening. And the Chiefs, desperately thin at edge rusher, armed with extra draft capital from the McDuffie trade, and just watching their primary target disappear to Los Angeles, were among the most interested parties. Chapter 7. Why this makes so much sense for Kansas City. Let's get into the actual football here. Because beyond the drama, beyond the trade rumors and the off-season noise, there's a very compelling argument for why Kayvon Thibodeaux would be a perfect fit in Kansas City. Start with the scheme. Defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo has one of the most creative, adaptable defensive systems in the NFL. He has consistently gotten the most out of his pass rushers, not because he gives them simple, one-dimensional assignments, but because he puts them in positions to succeed based on their specific skill sets. He knows how to use speed off the edge. He knows how to create mismatches. He knows how to disguise coverages and blitz packages to generate free rushers. Thibodeaux's game was built for exactly this kind of system. He's not a pure bull rusher. He's athletic. He can bend around corners. He has the length and the closing speed to get to quarterbacks from unexpected angles. At 6 feet 4 inches and around 250 pounds, he fits the prototype that Spagnuolo has traditionally preferred on the edge. And critically, he has experience playing for Spagnuolo's old colleagues. He played at a high level in Brian Daboll's Giants system, and the defensive vocabulary he's learned over 4 NFL seasons translates directly to what Kansas City runs. ESPN analyst Ben Solak was actually the one who put this concept in front of the whole league when he ran a hypothetical trade simulation from Brett Veach's perspective. His analysis was blunt and honest. The Chiefs have been throwing draft picks at the edge rusher position for years trying to find juice. Felix Anudike-Uzomah in the 2023 first round, Ashton Gillotte in the 3rd round in 2025, Mason Thomas in the 2nd round in 2026. Why not one more swing? One more dart throw, as Solak put it? But here's what makes this dart throw different from the others. Thibodeaux isn't a prospect. He's a proven NFL player. He's played in the league for 4 years. He's gone up against elite offensive tackles. He's been in big games. He's learned what it takes to survive and compete at this level. That's different from taking a college kid and hoping the development happens. The risk is his health. The shoulder injury scared people. But if he comes back fully healthy in 2026, which early reports suggest he's on track to do, then you're potentially getting a player who has everything to prove and a contract year to prove it. That's a dangerous combination. A player with elite physical tools, proven NFL experience, 4 years of development under his belt, a full off-season of recovery from injury, and the motivation of impending free agency? You want that guy on your team. You want that energy in your locker room. You want that kind of professional desperation fueling your pass rush every single Sunday. Chapter 8. The Price Tag and the Puzzle. Now, here's where it gets complicated in the best possible way. What would it actually cost the Chiefs to get Thibodeau? The Giants' asking price, based on multiple reports, has been in the range of a third-round or fourth-round pick. That's it. In today's NFL, where a single draft pick can turn into a franchise cornerstone, giving up a third or fourth-round selection for a former fifth overall pick entering a contract year is almost laughably cheap. Why is the price so low? 2 reasons. 1. The Giants have too many pass rushers. Burns and Carter are clearly the future. Thibodeau is 1 year away from free agency. If they don't trade him and he walks in March 2027, they get nothing. That's a death sentence for a trade market. Teams know the leverage is with the buyer, not the seller. 2. Thibodeau's injury history has scared off teams who might otherwise be willing to pay a premium. The shoulder issue is legitimate. 10 games in 2025, 2.5 sacks. Those numbers don't exactly scream blockbuster trade value. But think about this from Kansas City's perspective. The Chiefs, after the McDuffie trade, have 9 total picks in the 2026 draft. 9. Including 4 in the top 100. They also have an extra third-round pick in 2027 specifically as a result of the McDuffie trade. Brett Veach has ammunition. He has currency to spend. And the cost of Thibodeau? 1 fourth-round pick. 1 third-round pick. That's not expensive. That's practically free for a player with this upside. Now, the Giants initially pushed back on offers in the 3rd through 5th round range, calling them insufficient. They said Thibodeau had impressed the new staff under first-year head coach John Harbaugh, and that they valued him higher than what other teams were offering. Head coach Harbaugh came to New York for a reason. He's not trying to rebuild, he's trying to compete immediately in a loaded NFC East. Having a deep pass rush room isn't a luxury, it's an advantage. So maybe it costs a little more than a 4th-round pick. Maybe the Giants hold out for a 3rd. Maybe they want some additional incentive. But even if the Chiefs have to slightly overpay, the math still works. Because what you're adding to this defense isn't just another body. You're adding possibility. You're adding a player who, on his best days, can look like a top 10 pass rusher in the entire NFL. And paired with what's already in Kansas City? Let's paint the picture. Chapter 9. The Big Picture. Close your eyes for a second and think about what the Kansas City Chiefs defense could look like with Kayvon Thibodeau added to the mix. You start with Chris Jones on the inside. Still one of the most disruptive interior defenders in football. Still capable of taking over games single-handedly with his combination of speed, strength, and technique. At his best, he makes offensive lines do things they don't want to do. He makes offensive coordinators adjust their entire game plan around one man. You add George Karlaftis on the edge. A legitimate, every-down starter who has developed into a consistent presence against the run and the pass. Dependable. Competitive. Experienced. You put Ashton Gil-Latte in the rotation, a 3rd-round pick from 2025 who showed genuine promise as a run defender with pass rush upside. You have rookie Mason Thomas out of Oklahoma, a 2nd-round pick in 2026, giving Spagnuolo another young option to develop. And then, right in the middle of all of that, you slide in Kayvon Thibodeau. A 6'4", 250-pound former 5th overall pick entering a contract year, healthy again, motivated, playing for Steve Spagnuolo, playing next to Chris Jones, knowing that one great season could earn him a market-resetting contract extension. Suddenly that pass rush doesn't look weak anymore. Suddenly opposing offensive coordinators have a real problem. You can't double-team Jones and deal with Thibodeau and account for Karlaftis and respect Gil-Latte all at the same time. The math doesn't work. Somebody is getting through. And when somebody is getting through in Spagnuolo's system, where the secondary is tight, where the scheme is designed to buy time and create confusion, bad things happen for the offense. And remember, this is the same Kansas City Chiefs team that has Patrick Mahomes. Which means they only need their defense to be good. They don't need it to be historically great. They just need it to be good enough to keep games close, to keep the opponent from running away with a score, to give Mahomes and his offense enough possessions to work their magic. In a close game, in a playoff game, in a Super Bowl, a motivated Kayvon Thibodeau in a Spagnuolo scheme could be the difference between winning and losing. Chapter 10. The Domino Effect. Let's zoom out for a moment, because the beauty of this story is that it's not just about the Chiefs and the Giants. The Myles Garrett trade kicked over a row of dominoes that is still falling. Think about everything that has happened in the last few weeks as a direct result of this one earthquake of a transaction. The Rams got Myles Garrett, making them immediate Super Bowl favorites. They now have the reigning MVP and the reigning Defensive Player of the Year on the same roster, something that literally has never happened before in the modern NFL era. That's terrifying for every team in the NFC. The Seahawks, the Eagles, the Packers, the Lions. All of them woke up to a monster on the opposite side of the conference. The Browns, meanwhile, are sitting on a mountain of future draft picks and a young, cheap pass rusher in Jared Verse who, at 24 years old, might develop into exactly the kind of player Garrett was, just on a much smaller contract. Andrew Berry got roasted in the Cleveland media, predictably, because Browns fans have been burned enough times to assume everything ends in disaster. But objectively, he got full value. He got more than full value. 2 first-round picks in 2027, additional picks in 2028 and 2029, and a former top 5 pick at a premium position. That's a legitimate haul for a player entering his 30s on a massive contract. The Chiefs, meanwhile, are in a fascinating spot. They traded Trent McDuffie, one of the best players on their team, and got back draft picks. They turned around and used those picks to address the secondary and the defensive line in the draft. But the pass rush is still a question mark. And now, with Garrett off the board, the pressure is on Brett Veach to find something real. Every team in the AFC is watching. The Baltimore Ravens know the Chiefs are vulnerable. The Buffalo Bills know it. The Cincinnati Bengals know it. The Houston Texans, the Denver Broncos, the Los Angeles Chargers, they all saw what happened when Kansas City's pass rush disappeared in 2025. They all watched the Chiefs go 6-11 while Mahomes threw for 35 touchdowns and still couldn't drag his team to the postseason. The window isn't closing for Kansas City. As long as Mahomes is healthy and in his prime, the window stays open. But it's getting narrower. Every year that passes without a championship is another year someone else is getting rings. And Mahomes has made no secret of the fact that he wants to win more. He wants rings. He wants to be talked about in the same breath as Brady. Maybe above Brady. To do that, he needs help. He needs a defense. He needs pass rushers. Kayvon Thibodeau, at this price, at this moment in his career, might be exactly what this team needs. Chapter 11. The Giants' Dilemma. Let's spend a minute in New York, because the Giants' situation is genuinely fascinating and it matters a lot to how this story ends. John Harbaugh is there now. John Harbaugh, the guy who spent over a decade in Baltimore turning the Ravens into one of the most consistently excellent programs in NFL history. A guy who has reached the Super Bowl, who has developed quarterbacks, who has built elite defenses from scratch. He came to New York because he saw talent. He saw pieces. He saw an opportunity to build something special. His defensive philosophy is no secret. In Baltimore, Harbaugh always prioritized getting after the quarterback. The Ravens under him had some of the best pass rushes in the league at various points. Terrell Suggs, Elvis Dumervil, Zadarius Smith, Justin Houston. The message was always the same. If you can disrupt the quarterback, you can control the game. He has Brian Burns. He has Abdul Carter. Both elite. And he has Kayvon Thibodeau, a player that, according to reports, has impressed the new staff this offseason. That quote matters. If Harbaugh is already high on Thibodeau after a few weeks of practice, then the Giants' asking price is going to go up, not down. But here's the tension. Thibodeau is entering the final year of his rookie deal. He will be a free agent in March 2027 unless the Giants sign him to an extension. And with Burns and Carter both locked in long-term, the cap math is brutal. Edge rushers are expensive. You simply cannot pay 3 elite edge rushers at market rate simultaneously. It doesn't work. So the Giants have a choice. Option A. Keep Thibodeau, let him play 2026 on his 5th-year option at about $15 million, watch him, hopefully, have a great season, and then let him walk in free agency for nothing. You got 1 more year of production and 0 compensation. Option B. Trade him now, get back a pick, and use that pick to fill a different hole on the roster. You lose the production but you gain assets and you free up $15 million in cap space. Option C. Sign him to a long-term extension right now, before he hits free agency. This would require paying him something in the range of $25 to $30 million per year, which is massive but not impossible for a premier edge rusher. The problem is the Giants already have Burns on a big deal and Carter on a rookie deal that will become enormous when his time comes for an extension. None of these options is clean. None of them is obviously right. And that ambiguity is exactly what makes Thibodeau available at such a low price. The Giants don't know what they want to do. Teams are calling with lowball offers. And somewhere in Kansas City, Brett Veach is calculating exactly how much he needs to offer to finally get a yes. Chapter 12. The Historical Precedent. Let me give you some context for why the Chiefs' interest in Thibodeau shouldn't surprise anyone. Brett Veach has made a career out of finding undervalued assets, squeezing production out of players who were written off, and assembling championship-level rosters without necessarily spending at the very top of every market. Not always. When he really wants someone, he pays, but he's a smart buyer. He understands value. And the history of the league is full of players who changed teams and suddenly became the versions of themselves that everyone always expected they could be. Think about Jalen Ramsey, who bounced around before becoming elite. Think about the number of edge rushers who were considered disappointments on one team and then thrived in a different scheme. Think about even Trent McDuffie, who went from Kansas City's cornerback to being signed by the Rams to the highest-paid cornerback contract in NFL history. Sometimes a change of scenery, a new coaching staff, a new system, is exactly what a talent needs to reach its ceiling. Kayvon Thibodeau on a contract year, playing for Steve Spagnuolo, playing next to Chris Jones, trying to prove he is the player the Giants always thought he could be? That's a dangerous human being. And dangerous human beings on contract years have a long, rich tradition in Kansas City. Remember Dee Ford? Damian Williams? Frank Clark? The Chiefs have consistently gotten big-time performances out of players who had something to prove. Thibodeau fits that profile almost perfectly. Chapter 13. The bigger story nobody is telling. Okay, we need to take a step back. Because there's a storyline happening here that goes beyond one trade and one potential new acquisition. There's a bigger picture developing in the NFL landscape right now, and the Myles Garrett trade is a massive piece of it. The era of franchise loyalty, of players staying with one team their entire career, of stars being defined by their original organization, is officially over. And it has been for a while, but this week crystallized it in a way that nothing else has. In the span of just a few weeks, the NFL has seen Myles Garrett traded. It has seen Trent McDuffie traded. It has seen Jalen Watson leave Kansas City as a free agent to join the Rams alongside his former teammate. It has seen A.J. Brown traded, yes, that A.J. Brown, one of the best wide receivers in the league, in a separate blockbuster deal that shook the other side of the football world. The Cowboys traded Micah Parsons to the Packers. The league's best pass rusher, up until Garrett broke the record, changed uniforms. These aren't depth players. These aren't role players being shuffled around for salary cap reasons. These are franchise cornerstones. These are faces of franchises. These are the guys fans buy jerseys for, the guys kids grow up wanting to be, the guys whole stadium experiences are built around. And they are all moving. The NFL has entered a new era of player movement that looks more like the NBA than it ever has before. General managers are more aggressive than ever. Players are more empowered than ever. The trade market has opened up in ways that would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. And in this new era, the teams that win are the ones that are willing to be flexible. Willing to say goodbye to good players in order to acquire great ones. Willing to trade future assets for present excellence when the moment is right. The Rams understand this. They've been doing it for years. Does Kansas City? Under Brett Veach and Andy Reid, the Chiefs have always been more conservative with their moves. They've built through the draft. They've extended their own guys. They've been willing to spend on free agency but not reckless about it. But the 6-11 season was a wake-up call. Something has to change. And in the current NFL landscape, the most logical change, the most efficient, cost-effective, immediate upgrade available, is staring Brett Veach right in the face. His name is Kayvon Thibodeaux. He costs a day 2 pick. And his team is about to make him available. Chapter 14. What happens next? So where does this all go? Let's lay out the possibilities, because there are really a few different ways this story can end. Scenario 1. The Giants hold firm. They keep Thibodeaux. He has a monster 2026 season playing in Harbaugh's system, proves everyone wrong, and walks into free agency in March 2027 as one of the most sought-after pass rushers in the market. If this happens, the Chiefs missed their shot. They have to find another way. Scenario 2. The market never develops the way the Giants hope. The best offer they get is a 3rd or 4th round pick, and eventually they decide that something is better than nothing. They call Veach. Veach says yes. Thibodeaux lands in Kansas City for pennies on the dollar relative to his potential impact. Scenario 3. Someone else swoops in. The Saints have been mentioned. The Patriots have been mentioned. The Rams, yes, the same Rams who just got Garrett, have also been mentioned, though that one seems unlikely given the cap constraints of everything else they've done this offseason. If another team gets desperate enough and offers the Giants something they can't refuse, Kansas City misses out again. Right now, based on everything we know, based on the reporting, based on the cap situations, based on the roster construction, Scenario 2 feels the most likely. The Giants are in a holding pattern, not a firm no. They're evaluating whether the right offer is out there. And with the Chiefs holding more draft capital than almost any other team in the league, with a desperate need at edge rusher, with a defensive coordinator who is perfectly suited to maximize Thibodeau's talent, the pieces fit. The logic is almost too clean. And in the NFL, when the pieces fit too cleanly, that's usually when something actually happens. Chapter 15. The Mahomes Factor. We can't finish this story without talking about Patrick Mahomes. Because at the end of the day, every single thing we've talked about, every trade, every roster decision, every calculation Brett Veach makes, it all comes back to him. Patrick Mahomes is 30 years old. He is entering what should be the absolute peak of his career. He has already won multiple Super Bowls. He has already won multiple MVP awards. He has already cemented a legacy that would make most quarterbacks envious if they played their whole career and never approached what he's accomplished. But he is not done. He has made that clear. He is playing with a chip on his shoulder that somehow manages to get bigger every year, even as his accomplishments stack up. After the 6-11 season, the worst of his professional life, he came back into the offseason with something to prove. Something burning. He can see what's happening around him. He can see the Rams loading up with Garrett and McDuffie. He can see the Bills building and the Ravens improving and the Bengals never going away. He knows the AFC is not going to get easier. He knows that rings don't come in bundles. You have to fight for every single one of them. And he needs his defense to help him. Mahomes has always been able to drag his team when the defense underperformed. He did it in 2022 when the offense carried a defense that couldn't get off the field. He did it in back-to-back Super Bowl runs when everything around him was imperfect. But 6-11 tells you even the greatest quarterback who ever played the position can only do so much with one arm and two legs. The 2026 season is pivotal. The entire franchise is watching. The entire league is watching. And if the Chiefs come out of this offseason without addressing their biggest need, the thing that hurt them most last year, the thing that made even Patrick Mahomes look human, then the questions will be fair. A healthy, motivated Kayvon Thibodeaux might not be Myles Garrett. Nobody is Myles Garrett right now except Myles Garrett. But Thibodeaux might be the right player, in the right scheme, on the right team, at the right price. And sometimes that's all you need. Chapter 16. The Final Verdict. Let's bring this all together. Because we started with a bombshell, the most dominant defensive player in football getting traded to a team trying to win a Super Bowl in their own stadium, and we followed that thread all the way to a player in New York whose name keeps appearing on Brett Veach's radar. Here is the full picture. Myles Garrett requested a trade. The Browns said no and gave him a record extension. He won Defensive Player of the Year anyway. He didn't show up to off-season activities. He didn't meet with the new head coach. The Rams, who had been systematically building the most talented roster in the NFC by trading away Kansas City's cornerback, adding Jalen Watson, and loading up everywhere, came in with a massive offer. The Browns, after months of saying they'd never move him, accepted. Garrett goes to Los Angeles. The NFL shakes. The Rams become Super Bowl favorites. And Kansas City, who had Garrett as a top target, who needed him desperately, who watched him slip through their fingers, is left looking for Plan B. Plan B is Kayvon Thibodeaux, a former 5th overall pick. A 4-year veteran with proven production. A player entering a contract year on the final year of his rookie deal. A guy whose team has too many pass rushers, whose market value has been suppressed by injury, whose asking price is so low that it almost feels like a mistake. The Chiefs have the picks to make it happen. They have the scheme to maximize it. They have the quarterback to make a single defensive addition matter more than it would on any other team in football. And the Myles Garrett trade, the deal that took away their primary target, might have revealed the one alternative that fits even better for what Kansas City actually needs right now. Not a superstar on a massive contract. Not a player who demands the game be built around him. A hungry, motivated, affordable, proven edge rusher who wants to prove the world wrong. The NFL is a league of dominoes. One big move knocks over another. And another. And another. Until you follow the chain all the way back to its source and you find the real story, not just the headline trade, but the ripple effects that nobody else is tracking. The Myles Garrett trade to the Rams is the headline. Kayvon Thibodeaux to the Chiefs might be the story that matters most in the long run. Watch this space. Because Brett Veach is watching. Steve Spagnuolo is watching. And somewhere in Arrowhead Stadium, Patrick Mahomes is watching too. He's always watching. And when the greatest quarterback alive decides he needs something, he has a tendency to find a way to get it. This story is just getting started.